Okay guys, we got all the supplies here now. So we have 96 bags, 60-pound bags of concrete. We have 10 bags of Quikrete, which generally you mix about 3 of these bags into the concrete mixer and then a half a bag of the Quikrete, and that'll kind of speed up the drying process. We also got 10 bags of mortar so we can set the first layer of brick and make sure that's all nice and flat and plumb and square and all that good stuff. And then we have 260 of these 6-inch wide by 8-inch tall by 16 long cinder blocks. And then we also have a batch of 25 20-foot long 3/8 rebar out there. And I did some more digging in here, and so basically what I ended up doing was putting a stake in all of the corners of where the slab needed to go, and then I strung it and then leveled that string. So now I knew where the plane was for the finished slab, and then I ended up digging out some high spots and making sure that we could get a full, true, at least 4-inch of concrete down there with the rebar and everything. And it's just nice to know where your corners are. And also, once you have your corners, or in the process of setting my corners, I ran a plumb board up and then measured out from that board to the slab, so that way I know that that square is square to the slab opening. So that should be about 5 inches from the edge of the existing slab on all sides, except for this side it'll be about 6 inches. So hopefully we'll get all this done in the next week or so and we'll crank this thing out. But we got a lot of work to do, a lot of concrete to mix. I made a little chute out of PVC sheet, so this should help us at least fill the cavities in the wall so we don't make a huge mess. But we'll keep cranking away at this thing. Quick update here before we get started doing the slab. What we did was we have 3/8 inch rebar, and we bent that to essentially be about 8.5 feet on center, which should land us in the center of the cells on the 6-inch blocks that we're using around the entire bunker. And then we have basically a framework that I made first, which you guys will see in the time lapse, and tied those together, got that square. So we now had a square of 3/8 rebar that's at 8.5 feet, even though the slab is going to be about 9 feet. And then we added some more rebars with extensions coming up, and these are 20-foot sticks, so you basically just bend, I think I measured off the end about 72 or so inches, and you basically just stand in front of the rebar with your foot, and you can pull it around your foot. So you can bend them all yourself just by hand. So I just made a quick little, some marks on the concrete over there, and just pulled the rebar in, made the first bend up, and then lined that bend up with one of the scribe marks in the concrete. And then I had another mark over where my other bend needed to be, and I made 8 of those, and that's what we used for the slab. So we have another piece of rebar, 32 inches from the corner on each end. And then we got those all the way, so we now have a grid work. So once we put our rebar chairs or our rebar standoffs underneath, which will hold the rebar about 1.5 inches off the ground, which should put us somewhere in the center of the slab, then we should be good to go. And now at least we can use the rebar as our, essentially our shape for the forms, so we can measure off of the rebar down in the bottoms, since we know that that's square. And we can use that now because obviously the strings are going to be gone because they're going to be in the concrete. So we can get that slab all set, and then you want to make sure that you get your rebar set where it needs to go, because once the rebar's in there, you're kind of at the behest of the rebar as far as your base square that you put down. And your base, you're really going to be running everything off of your base. So we have our shorter blocks that we're going to run on the base, and those will get mortared in, and we'll get that nice and square, and make sure you measure up to the slab, the original slab opening. So that way we can make sure that obviously the base is square to itself, and then we want it somewhat square to the slab opening, just so it doesn't look like shit when we're done. You know, I mean, if you have a bunker that's square but it's crooked to the original opening, then when they pour the slab on top, it's gonna look weird. Even though you're not really gonna see it, but you will. Then we kind of got to fudge the door opening to make the door opening square, but then when you're inside, the door opening isn't going to be square with the bunker. So just try to measure as much as you can. Obviously there's a lot of wiggle room because it is concrete work, but you want to get it, you know, to look good. I mean, you only get one chance to pour this thing and make it, and then it's going to be here. So I'll probably end up actually adding some more rebar to the base just to further support the walls. But yeah, just because, I mean, if we have another, I think 17 sticks of 20-foot rebar, so we have plenty to be able to add more into the walls. So I'm not sure if we'll add any more vertical and through the slab. We might just add a couple rings around, because there is a channel in those blocks where we can throw some rebar through. So pretty cool. Hopefully you guys will switch you over to the time lapse. You guys can watch us do the slab. We're gonna pour the slab, half of it, finish that, wait for it to set up, and then pour the other half, finish that, and then once that's all set and nice and flat and perfect, then we can do the very bottom row. That'll be mortared in, and then the plan is that we're just gonna use this Loctite landscape adhesive to glue the other bricks on the base. So once we have a good, nice, flat, square base, we should be able to just use this stuff, and this stuff's actually stronger than mortar. It's just obviously not as aesthetic because you're not gonna see like a joint and stuff. So this is perfect for what we're doing, because we're essentially just trying to keep the blocks together and strong enough for us to fill all of the cavities with concrete. I mean, the mortar's not going to do anything as far as structurally in this anyway, because we're obviously filling the columns with concrete, and the columns will have rebar. So it's really, you're basically using the cinder blocks as forms for the concrete walls. So yeah, we'll keep you guys going along with the process. Hopefully you guys can build one of these yourself, and we'll touch base later on. down in the bunker hole. And hopefully try to move over here where the fan's not so loud. But I don't know if that fan's ruining the audio or not, but we're in the bunker. We poured the slab. What I'm doing now is so I have some chalk lines down. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I have chalk lines down, and those are square. And that should be pretty square with the existing footing that we have up top. So we'll end up about 5 inches off of that existing footing, all the way around. But the problem I have now is that, so the 8x16, cinder blocks are not actually 8x16, they're a little shorter, about a ½ inch per side, because they allow for the mortar. Well, we weren't planning on really using mortar in between them to fit another block in here, and because we wanted to use the landscape adhesive, which is a lot stronger and obviously a lot more easier, more easy. The problem we have now is that after doing the square and putting the blocks where, essentially getting the room pretty square, the rebar must have moved quite a bit while we were pouring the concrete, so it's out of square by about 2.5 inches. So basically what would happen is, in that corner over there, the rebar would not fall into the cavity, and then we'd have problems. It'll be like on the very edge of the brick. So, I mean, we could notch the very edge and just kind of cover it with some grout and basically push the rebar into the cavity and then bend it a little so that way it would go into all the other cavities, essentially. But I'm not sure if, I don't know. I'm just not sure if we really want to do that. But we'll get moving along here. I think I'm going to try some of the landscape adhesive, see how thick it is. If it foams like most landscape adhesive, we might be able to get away with having a little bit of a gap in between blocks. But with the blocks shoved up against each other, you essentially lose a little over 6 inches of wall length, so you have to add another block into your wall if you don't use mortar. So obviously on the very base row we're going to use mortar on the bottom regardless, because we need to make sure that's all nice and flat and plumb and level and everything. But I don't know, I'm just going to start doing some stuff and see what works. And if we can, I would like to continue making this without the mortar, but we'll see. I just don't want to mortar 260 bricks. That wasn't the plan when I wanted to build this. Plus the walls are going to be filled with concrete anyway, so essentially the mortar is just holding the blocks together for the concrete to settle, especially when you have rebar running through the columns. So we'll start plugging away. We'll switch you over to the time lapse and you can watch me mess around and probably be frustrated for the first couple hours of this.